Tonight, foreign policy under fire.
Every single one of us is better than Barack Obama.
At last night's Republican debate, candidates take on the White House and each other on everything from Iran's nuclear program to the definition of torture. Jan Crawford will have the latest. President Obama, on the eve of the Asia-Pacific summit, is prodding world leaders to address the Iranian challenge. Norah O'Donnell is there. Look who's taking charge. We'll meet the recent college grad who was elected mayor last week at the age of 22. And you've heard the voice at the airport.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Tonight, Lee Cowan introduces you to the woman behind the microphone.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. One day after the latest Republican presidential debate, the candidates and the White House continue to trade attacks. That debate, seen here on CBS last night, was seen as make or break for some candidates, and they saved most of their punches for the Obama administration. Chief political correspondent Jan Crawford has more tonight from Washington. Jan, good evening.
Well, good evening, Russ. This was the 10th Republican debate, but it was the first to focus solely on foreign policy to test which of these candidates could be trusted the most to handle that 3 a.m. phone call in the White House. The issues were complex, the answers serious.
This is a very dangerous time.
There were no gimmicks or slogans, no real jabs thrown. When given the chance to take a shot at frontrunner Mitt Romney, Newt Gingrich pulled back his punch.
We're here tonight talking to the American people about why every single one of us is better than Barack Obama.
Throughout the debate, the candidates sharply criticized President Obama and made clear their differences were stark.
If I were president, I would be willing to use waterboarding. I think it was very effective. It gained information for our country.
Our current president has made it very clear that he's not willing to do those things necessary to get Iran to be dissuaded from their nuclear folly. I will take a different course.
There are a number of ways to be smart about Iran and relatively few ways to be dumb.
There were no obvious stumbles. Governor Rick Perry joked about his brain freeze.
And the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
In the last debate.
Governor Perry, you advocate the elimination of the Department of Energy. If you eliminate the Department of Energy...
Glad you remembered it.
I've had some time to think about it, sir.
Me too.
Needing a solid performance, Perry came down strong on the issue of foreign aid, triggering criticism from rivals.
The foreign aid budget in my administration for every country is going to start at $0.
He later clarified that he didn't mean that Israel would lose American dollars.
Israel is a special ally, and my bet is that we would be funding them at some substantial level.
On the tough questions, Herman Cain said he would listen to his generals, but when would he overrule them?
And I feel that I'll be able to make that assessment when we put together the cabinet and all of the people from the military, etc.
Now, Perry and Cain have the least amount of foreign policy experience, and sometimes it showed last night, although both avoided any major missteps. The two with the best showing, once again, Russ, that honor's got to go to Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich.
Jan Crawford in our Washington bureau. Thank you very much. President Obama is in Hawaii today for the Asia-Pacific summit and was quick to fire back at Republicans. Chief White House correspondent Norah O'Donnell is in Honolulu with the very latest. Norah, good evening to you.
And good evening to you, Russ. That's right. President Obama's top advisors dismissed some of that withering Republican criticism, specifically on the issue of Iran, saying this president has done more to isolate and pressure Iran than any other previous commander-in-chief.
Morning, guys. As President Obama hosts this Asia-Pacific Economic Summit in his home state of Hawaii.
We're not going to be able to put our folks back to work and grow our economy and expand opportunity unless the Asia-Pacific region is also successful.
The top issue should be boosting world trade and increasing American jobs. But the standoff with Iran also dominated President Obama's talks with the leaders of China and Russia, who have blocked U.S. efforts to tighten sanctions.
We discussed Iran and reaffirmed our intention to work to shape a common response.
Still, despite all the diplomacy, neither China nor Russia echoed Mr. Obama's public call for solidarity against the rogue nation.
Would it be worth going to war to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon?
As for last night's debate and Romney's claim that the president has been weak on Iran,
If we re-elect Barack Obama, Iran will have a nuclear weapon. And if we elect Mitt Romney, if you elect me as the next president, they will not have a nuclear weapon.
the president's deputy national security advisor, Ben Rhodes, dismissed the criticism as nothing more than campaign rhetoric.
This administration has expressed a very firm commitment to preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
In terms of action, President Obama has already done many of the things that the Republicans are clamoring for. This president has tightened sanctions, he has used covert action against Iran, and he has said no option is off the table, including military action as a last resort. Russ?
Nora O'Donnell in Honolulu, thank you very much. Also at the APEC summit, Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper said today he is disappointed the U.S. decided to delay approval of the proposed Keystone XL oil pipeline. That pipe would run from Alberta across the U.S. to the Texas Gulf. Harper said Canada would try to sell the oil to China and other Asian markets. Allegations of sexual abuse now shaking the Citadel, the South Carolina Military College. Officials said this weekend they regret they did not further pursue a 2007 complaint against youth camp counselor Louis Reveal, who was accused of showing pornography and performing a sex act in front of 2 boys 5 years earlier. Reveal was arrested last month on unrelated child molestation charges. Longtime Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is out, and new Prime Minister Mario Monti is in. This following a brief handover of power at the presidential palace tonight. Monti, an economist, must now implement the tough austerity program demanded by the European Union. In Japan this weekend, a group of reporters got a close-up view of the devastated Fukushima nuclear plant. 8 months after the meltdown, the scale of the cleanup job that still lies ahead is clear for all to see. Lucy Kraft in Tokyo has more.
Radiation levels are still so lethal around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, reporters, even in protective gear and masks, were forced to stay inside their bus as they toured the devastation. But even from a distance, the world's closest look yet at the 4 damaged reactors was shocking. Heavily reinforced concrete containment buildings torn to shreds after a series of meltdowns and hydrogen explosions triggered by the loss of power after the massive earthquake and tsunami last March. The first week after the tsunami was the hardest, says plant manager Masao Yoshida. Many times I thought we were going to die. While the immediate danger is past, for the 3,000 men working at Fukushima Daiichi, the hazards are ever present. Radiation levels are still high, warns Yoshida, and it's still dangerous to work here. The president of embattled utility operator TEPCO, Toshio Nishizawa, tells CBS News he believes a cold shutdown of the plant, when inside temperatures are brought down below boiling point, is within sight by the end of this year. The opening of the devastated plant to reporters was front-page news across the country.
Radiation levels here in Tokyo, 140 miles away from the plant, of course, are much lower. But contamination of the atmosphere and food supply remains an acute source of anxiety here.
Contaminated sewage sludge covered in blue tarp is piling up in Tokyo because no one knows how to dispose of it. An unpredictable patchwork of hotspots, pockets of high radiation, especially in fallen leaves, has cropped up across the greater Tokyo area. Japan faces a cleanup process expected to take decades. Officials admit they have no idea when, if ever, the nearly 80,000 residents will be able to return home. Lucy Kraft, CBS News, Tokyo.
Later, a new college grad lands his first job, mayor. The woman behind the voice of all those airport public address announcements, and the U.S. military prison that holds far more terrorist suspects than Guantanamo Bay. Those stories when the CBS Evening News continues. Police in riot gear today removed hundreds of demonstrators from Oregon's Occupy Portland protest in a downtown park and began to dismantle the camp. No violence was reported. Portland's mayor had ordered the camp vacated by midnight last night, but many protesters had refused to leave. The first military commission trial of accused al-Qaeda terrorists under the Obama administration began last week at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where the prisoner population is down to 170. But at another U.S. military prison you may have never heard of, the population is in the thousands. Seth Doan reports from Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base.
He won't reveal his face or even his full name, but 52-year-old Mohammed wants his story told. He claims he has trouble walking now after spending a year confined to a 35-square-foot jail cell as a U.S. prisoner of war in Afghanistan. Our cells were like cages, he explains. We couldn't see anything outside. These are what those cells look like. Roughly an hour's drive from Kabul, the detention facility at Bagram is veiled in secrecy, except for a few carefully choreographed glimpses like this media tour 2 years ago. The military won't disclose the names of its detainees or the reasons for continuing to hold them. Someone had reported that I was helping the Taliban, he tells us. Mohammed says he's never supported the Taliban. In fact, he says he's an educator who even teaches girls in school. He claims to be trained as an engineer, not as a terrorist. There are now 3,000 alleged insurgents detained at Bagram, 5 times as many as when President Obama took office. The military says it's providing safe and humane care, but our repeated requests for a tour or even an interview were declined.
Is this another Guantanamo?
It's worse than Guantanamo. It really is, because they have fewer rights.
Daphne Eviatar is an attorney for Human Rights First, a nonprofit advocacy group. She's interviewed nearly 20 detainees who've been released and was allowed to watch several detainee hearings at Bagram.
There's no evidence presented. There was no questioning of the government's evidence, whether this person had done anything wrong, whether he deserved to be in prison. So that's the real problem. You have a complete lack of due process.
The good news for our troops is that we've got people off the battlefield that were shooting at them last year.
Republican U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has been an attorney in the Air Force and has visited Bagram. He supports the Obama administration's plans to expand the detention facility.
Here's the dilemma for U.S. forces. You capture these people on the battlefield in a firefight. The local community tells you this is the bad guy. We're not going to turn him back over to an Afghan legal system that is full of corruption and doesn't have capacity.
The Department of Defense has asked contractors for bids to expand the facility within a year to house 5,500 detainees, costing as much as $100 million. Seth Doan, CBS News, Kabul.
Back home, Evelyn Lauder, longtime executive of the family cosmetics business and breast cancer survivor, died this weekend of ovarian cancer. In 1992, Lauder created the now familiar pink ribbons that symbolize breast cancer awareness. She also founded the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. Evelyn Lauder was 75 years old. And we'll be back. In the current economy, most college graduates feel lucky to get a job, any job. In Western Massachusetts last week, a 22-year-old landed his first job. He's now the mayor of his hometown. And that's tonight's Sunday cover. The fresh face who is set to lead a city of 40,000 people.
This has always been about the future of the city of Holyoke.
At 22, Alex Morris is the mayor-elect of Holyoke, Massachusetts. He beat the incumbent last Tuesday with 53% of the vote.
Never once did I listen to the folks who said, you're too young, you haven't paid your dues.
When Morris announced his candidacy in January, he was a senior at Brown University. Do you think your opponents took you for granted when this race began?
Yes, I think they did. Because of my age, they definitely took me for granted.
Holyoke is a diverse, working-class city and one of the poorest in Massachusetts. Its once thriving paper mills now stand idle. Nearly 30% of its residents live below the federal poverty line, and unemployment is 11%. What's the biggest change you think needs to take place here in Holyoke?
People need to know we exist.
Making downtown a destination again is high on Morse's agenda.
We're close to renovating the Victory Theater, restoring it, so that within a couple of years people can return to downtown Holyoke and enjoy a show with their friends and family.
Morse will manage a $120 million annual budget. He sees investing in this site, a high-tech office park, as a magnet for new jobs.
We have some of the cheapest utility rates in the entire state and all across New England, and 80% of our energy is renewable.
Morse grew up in Holyoke, the son of a meatpacker and a nurse, the youngest of 3 boys. At 11, he joined the city's youth commission. At 15, he was class president. He just graduated from college in May.
I think of my age as an incredible asset in that I haven't been around for 20, 30 years. I'm not beholden a special interest. I haven't been around long enough to owe anybody a political favor. People often say young people are the leaders of tomorrow, but they're in fact the leaders of today.
Alex Morris takes office in January. It is just a 2-year term, but he told me he would like to serve for the next 8 to 10 years. Even then, by law, he will still be too young to run for president. Coming up, she's the public address voice at 200 airports worldwide. Her story is next. Finally this evening, it's the voice of the airport that tells us to watch your bags or don't park in a loading zone. We know what she sounds like. Well, tonight, Lee Cowan introduces us to the woman behind the voice.
Welcome to New York Kennedy International Airport.
In a way, she's a lot like your luggage.
Welcome to Charles de Gaulle International Airport.
Everywhere you go,
There's an uptown train.
there she is. That gentle but authoritative voice echoing in the center of chaos.
It's the soothing voice, and she says it in such a nice way.
That Midwestern accent hails from a place you might not expect. A bucolic little village in northern Maine.
Thank you for your understanding.
Where that voice has a face.
Jakarta,
Carolyn
aircraft
Hopkins'
and
face.
crew. While on the moving sidewalk, please stand to the right.
At 63 years old, she emails those little greetings from her modest office.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please.
And most, she says, she does with a smile.
Traveling can be such a bummer nowadays that people need a friendly voice.
She started almost by accident. She worked at Innovative Electronic Designs, the company that sells paging and public address systems. They had a product, she had the secret ingredient.
My father had a big, deep, booming voice, and I always kind of imitated him. It was a little strange for a girl, but that's all right.
Her voice has gone places she herself has never been. 200 airports all around the world, subway stops, train stations. She even does weather warnings.
This is a tornado emergency.
But she's not perfect. There are some things even the voice can't quite spit out.
2 words: similarly and regularly. I just die when I see them in a piece of copy.
So the next time you hear an announcement that isn't such good news,
departure has been delayed due to...
just remember, she's only the messenger, and a jolly one at that. Lee Cowan, CBS News, Los Angeles.
So that's her. And that is the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS, 60 Minutes. Thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell at the CBS Broadcast Center in New York. Scott Pelley will be here tomorrow. Good night.